Hello, welcome to Tea and Toast. You have me now. As you can see, I'm not Georgia. And if I was Georgia, I'd have undergone some radical kind of surgery. But yeah, you've got me now, and we'll be doing it a little less frequently because I have a lot of other stuff to do as well. But welcome to Tea and Toast, and I'm joined with Bianca today. How are you doing,
morning.
Bianca?
I'm not too bad, thank you. So, like you, normally would be Jasmine here at the yard, but Jasmine is off this week. So, yeah, you've got me. Yay. So, we're all being different people this week.
So, the first thing I'd like to talk about today is the weather and how it's affecting people.
Okay. It's a bit cooler today, isn't it?
Yeah. What I find interesting or maybe irresponsible is how journalists report on the sun and report on it, but they don't actually talk about why. Like, this weather isn't normal,
No,
and it's caused by global warming, and all the articles don't really talk about that. Do you know what I mean? They don't frame it as this isn't normal, this is catastrophic, and we need to do something about it. They frame it as, let's go to the beach, let's go and get a paddling pool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is real problematic, isn't it? Because it feels like to me as if the whole globe is on fire, but we're just going, you know what, it doesn't matter, we'll have a barbecue.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We're literally watching the planet almost explode, and it's okay as long as we can get our skin a different colour whilst being racist in other parts of our lives.
But one of the things as well is it's not just sun, is it? There's extreme weather everywhere, like the floods in Germany. It floods pretty much every year in England now. And
well, even if you look at why, like historically, we used to have snow on Christmas, and now we don't have snow at Christmas because the weather is changing. Do you mean? So the extreme weather we know around Christmas time, we're more likely to get flooding in the UK. Do you mean how many years around that time do we have to see some poor community lose their homes and all their valuables because their community's flooded?
Look, I disagree with what the government have done over the pandemic, but at least they actually took some kind of action. Like, look at all the governments around the world where the pandemic was concerned. They all kind of did stuff, not straight away, but they all did stuff. And it's like with the climate crisis, they're just sitting on their hands or twiddling their thumbs and just hoping it goes away. And long term, even now, I don't know, but I'm sure the climate crisis is killing people now. And I reckon long term, those deaths are probably going to far exceed the deaths from the pandemic. It's just as urgent, I think, if not more so. And she's frozen. So you're going to have to listen to me just ramble on.
Sorry, that was my internet. It went a bit strange then, which I'm putting down to the weather. Too hot here at the yard.
So, yeah, the climate crisis is kind of being ignored. And you've got the good work of Extinction Rebellion, and there was a summer or two where it was on the agenda. But I think when there's extreme weather, it's irresponsible of journalists and newscasters to ignore the element of this, which is the climate crisis.
I think also what happened is there's some really good. Good morning, Sophia, creative educator. I think one of the other issues is that we had some really good protests, didn't we, where people were really raising the issues. And I like a lot of protests and issue. So when we do single-based issue work, it dies. It just stops.
They're still going. They're still doing stuff. But let's move on because there's something else that happened yesterday, which was quite interesting and entertaining.
But before you do, if you have an opinion on the crisis of the climate, send us a message, let us know, or pop down to the yard and continue the debate. We've got cups of tea ready for you to have a natter.
I won't be there, so please do go down because I won't be there and I won't have to listen to you.
You're feeling very social today, Steve.
What happened yesterday is a Labour MP called Dawn Butler got up in Parliament. They were discussing about an inquiry into the pandemic, and the Labour MP got up in Parliament and she called Boris Johnson a liar. And she got kicked out of Parliament because it's against parliamentary etiquette to call another MP a liar. And what do you think about that?
I think that it was really refreshing to see somebody speak words that in a language that ordinary people can understand. To me, it's not saying to like under right honourable gentleman, blah blah blah, but you're a liar. And actually, he is a liar.
Yeah.
So she knew the consequences of doing that. So I thought it was quite a brave move, especially for a black female MP who has suffered huge abuse online from trolls and racists. I was really pleased to see that. It reminded me of Dennis Skinner. So if you don't know who that is, because you're a bit of a younger person, it's worth Googling him. But when he said half the members are crooks, and he got told he had to change it, he said, well, half the members aren't crooks. So the only way that she could have changed it is said, Boris Johnson's a liar, everybody else is not a liar. But it's good to see real talk and people being held to account, because actually people have died. He knew they were going to die. He could have done something about it. He chose not to.
Well, it's backwards, really, isn't it? Because what kind of etiquette or what kind of rules exist in the Parliament that they protect the liar from who lies? Because calling out the liar is the thing that got her kicked out. Shouldn't Boris Johnson get kicked out for lying? Like, why is it okay to lie in Parliament, but it's not okay to call out someone for lying in Parliament? And then we sit around and wonder why we don't trust MPs, why we don't trust the government, why we don't trust Parliament, why people don't vote. They're allowed to lie, and no one can call them up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to just cause more kind of isolation and disconnection from politics, isn't it? Because we know that they're a liar. We've now got people telling us that they're lying, and nothing. Sophia's put, did we see the video afterwards? But she did. Did you see that, Steve?
Was it in the car when she was saying she was going home? I
Yeah,
saw that video.
I think so. Yeah, I saw that video. But good for her. She didn't look rattled at all. But I do think that it's a bit like when Boris Johnson was, I don't know what he was investigating. There was some kind of parliamentary standard thing. But he got to make the final decision. So I think it was about his expenses when he was having his kitchen and house redone and doing all that kind of stuff.
It's also an indictment of the other MPs and the opposition in general, that it's took a backbench MP to call out the farce that is this government and what they're going on. He goes up there pretty much every week and just lies.
Yeah.
And why is no one called him out thus far? You know, this isn't a new phenomenon. This has been going on since the beginning of his government. And well, if our government and our MPs can get away with lying, there can be no trust in the system, in my opinion, because where's the truth?
Yeah, absolutely. And we all, in our everyday lives, we build our friendships, our relationships on the truth, don't we? And when we find out that people lie to us, it changes the relationship that we have with them. We might choose to end friendships, we might choose to end relationships. But here, we're being made to keep our relationship with the Prime Minister, keep a relationship with a Conservative Party, who are continuously lying to us and selling us fake news, misinformation, and putting us all at risk. So, and as always, we know that young people and older people are at the butt of most of those policies.
Yeah, there's a video. I'm just trying to find it. That the video she was referencing by Peter Stenovic.
Yeah, Stenovic.
And he calls out he's the one who basically highlights all these lies, and it's had like
24 million.
27 million views. I'll post the link.
Did you want to watch it now?
I don't think you can do it on StreamYard. But watch that video and get informed, because the media are not doing it. And it leads on nicely to another point that the government are trying to do. They're trying to make it a criminal act for journalists and the media to post or create articles and stories which embarrass the government. So it essentially be illegal to create any kind of article which paints the government in negative light or essentially embarrasses them. They'll be able to pick and choose, so they wouldn't do it for everything. But it would be under the Official Secrets Act, which is already quite restrictive anyway. But this would basically mean that any story about the government that goes out would have to be okayed by the government.
See, when I read the book Animal Farm when I was at school, I didn't really believe that I'd be living it now. Do you know what I mean? Because it feels like the Conservative Party are the pigs in charge of the farm. And at the beginning, we all agreed this set of rules by their manifesto. That's what they got voted in on. And all of the time, they're scrubbing out a lot of manifesto and they're changing it. And they're going, you know what? We've said this all of the time. They're getting us to question what we know, what we can see and hear with our own eyes and ears, which is just outrageous. You can't actually believe this is happening.
Even like manifestos, they don't have to actually follow them or do what they say. It's like the manifesto should be like a binding contract with the electorate, in my opinion. They should have to commit and try at the very least to follow through what they say. Otherwise, I could create a manifesto that says one thing and do the complete opposite, which is what happens on a regular basis. And it's like with Boris Johnson, just two things that I can think of at the top of my head. When he got elected, they said they had an oven-ready Brexit deal. It took them a year to sort it out, and even now they're saying that the deal was rubbish and it's not what they wanted. Wasn't oven-ready. And then when they got elected, they said they had a plan for social care, and he's only just this week said, "Oh yeah, we're making a plan for social care now." Well, do you guys think it's important that there's truth in politics? Should the people who are supposed to be our betters in a way be held to a higher moral authority because they're not acting in a way which is right? If you're like Bianca said, if your friends acted this way, they wouldn't be your friends. If your employer acted this way, you wouldn't trust your employer. You'd probably look for another job. Also,
I think it's really important to remember that these people are making decisions that affect all of our lives. Do you mean how much funding the schools get? Do you mean they'll tell us that there's no funding, but there was funding for Serco, for track and trace, that didn't work? Yeah, so if you're working for any organisation and the project that you're commissioned to do doesn't work, then there are normally some kind of employment consequences to that. You don't get all of your money. So, for example, I've been Community Courtyard, I've been commissioned to do a summer program. We don't get the payment in one go, and if we don't deliver, we won't get the payment. So, how does it change when you're friends with the government? How is that okay?
That's why it's okay. And then
it's morally bankrupt, and it's about time people start getting a little bit angry about it. It's okay to be angry, you know.
It's called the revolt. It's called the revolving door. So basically, what happens is politicians who make the rules will give X company influence over the rules. Say, let's just use as an example. Let's use oil, for example. If they're creating new oil legislation, they'll get oil companies in and help craft the legislation. So the legislation is therefore favorable to the oil companies, and they do this on the assumption that when they leave politics, they'll be able to get a job at said oil company. And likewise, you'll have people from oil companies going in and becoming politicians. That was just an example, but one of the main ones that is far-reaching is the tax laws. So they actually get the people who advise companies how to essentially evade tax, or whether it's not avoid. I think it is the evasion is illegal, but avoidance isn't. So they get the people who the companies that advise how to avoid tax, they get them in to help write the tax laws. So then they know what the loopholes are and how to avoid the tax.
Yeah, see, and the problem is, in order to do that, you need to have money, don't you? So it's not something that ordinary people can do. So we'll all be struggling to pay our tax bills. And if we don't pay it, we get fined. So for ordinary people, for working class communities, for the communities that we represent, actually life is a lot harder. It's very unfair at the moment.
And then finally, one last thing I'd like to talk about is the pingdemic. Do you know what the pingdemic is?
Oh, yeah. It's where you've been in contact with somebody who's had COVID or something like that, and you've been pinged, so you've got to isolate.
Yeah, and because the government strategy now is to basically allow COVID to just do what it wants and go through the country, so many, and the cases are going through the roof, and there's a lot of people are getting pinged, and they're not being able to go to work, and they're having to isolate. And there's no support for these people anymore. So they've got to make a choice of delete the app or pretend they haven't been pinged. And too many people are getting pinged. So I think like nearly 1 million people were having to isolate. And they're calling, and the media are framing it like, oh, it's a problem with it's a pingdemic, they're calling it. And we don't, people aren't isolating. This is my opinion anyway. People aren't isolating because they're being pinged. There isn't a pingdemic. We have a pandemic. People are isolating because of COVID and to stop the spread of COVID. And it's like they spent nearly 40 billion on this system and it doesn't work. It's never worked properly. And now they're kind of creating a narrative which is turning people against the actual system which they created, which doesn't work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's typical of the government, isn't it? Which is to change the narrative. You're quite right, Steve. We should be talking about the pandemic still, and not a pandemic. There is a crisis because so many people who are able to isolate when they're in bigger companies like Nando's in Northampton has closed down this week because they don't have the staff. But to be honest, I don't know whether all of my staff team or people I know in the voluntary sector have the funds or the availability to isolate. This government still hasn't paid people for when they're isolated quickly enough and enough money. So what they want you to do is to isolate, but to do nothing.
So what they're doing now is they've got an exempt list. They've changed the rules. So there's they've made, because there's been food shortages now because of this, they are exempting certain industries. So the food, like Green Corps, for example, I assume, would be exempt from it. And what they'll have to do is they'll have to test themselves every day. If they come in, they won't have to isolate anymore. If they've come into contact with someone, they will have to instead have daily tests.
Yeah.
That's the new system that they're moving to for these exemption lists, which is all well and good, but you could test negative in the morning and be spreading it by the evening. Or I think you should still, I don't agree with the full 10-day isolation thing, but I do think that stopping the spread of that virus is important. But as the government are not doing anything about it anyway, the effects of isolating is probably going to be minimal because it's not an effective system that they have in the first place.
No, and the problem is now is that nobody trusts the government again. So it goes back to the conversation about the relationship we have with the government and trust, because I don't trust the government about the pandemic. It means that people are still reluctant around the vaccine, where we have had high intake for some age groups and some ethnicities. We know that black people and young people are still not high in terms of getting the vaccination. And why should we trust the government? Because so far they've got a track record of lies.
Yeah.
So it's really, really difficult to know exactly what's going on. I don't believe the numbers in terms of deaths. I think it's a lot more. I don't believe we're funding the NHS properly. I think there's also another agenda going on here, which is about the constant undermining of the NHS. The narrative that the NHS is at crisis point, No, what's at crisis point is a lack of funding for the NHS. The fact that our nurses and doctors have only been offered a 3% pay rise, which is an absolute insult when so many of them put their lives at risk, when so many of them, when I say so many, all of them, because hospitals had to stop to keep us all alive. How Boris Johnson and his cronies can do this when they were in hospital with COVID is an absolute, just, it blows my head apart about the lack of compassion, the lack of understanding between the Conservative Party and ordinary people. Because
They understand, they just don't care. The idea that drives them predominantly, there's probably a few of them that are okay, but the idea that drives these people is greed and power, and they know that they can make far more money out of the NHS if there isn't an NHS and it's a private healthcare system where companies that they have shares in or companies that they allow to come in pay them. So they are motivated by self-interest, not for the public good.
And actually, that's a really horrible thing to think about, isn't it? Because I like to think they don't care or they don't understand. But actually, you're quite right, Steve. They do understand. This is calculated. It's purposeful. They are doing this on purpose. They want the NHS to fail so that then they can privatise it. They want people to die, because that's the whole purpose of herd immunity. Because actually, it's the weakest people who are going to die first. And let's be honest, those people are the people who are taking up social housing, who are using the benefits, blah, blah, blah. In Tories' eyes, these are people who have
this is actually one of the weird things about it. As we know, the elderly are the most likely to die from this, and the elderly are the ones most likely to vote Conservative. And Johnson was pretty much prepared to let over 80s pretty much die en masse. And they're predominantly going to be Tory voters. So from that perspective, he wasn't thinking about the Tory party, I don't think. I think he just doesn't care about anybody.
The other thing I don't understand, though, Steve, is that when I speak to people, I was speaking to a couple of people at the Yard yesterday, and they'll say to me, but Boris is doing an all right job. It's really tough. It's tough for Boris. So I just want to share this. No, it's not tough for Boris. It's not tough at all. Well, Boris is living his best life. He's getting paid a really good wage. Yes, he's got to make some difficult decisions. You know what? We're all making difficult decisions. For the families who've got no money and they're trying to work out how to feed their children, they're making a difficult decision. What Boris is doing is making calculated decisions with loads of advisors around him. There's nothing difficult about it.
Well, I heard a good quote in relation to this. It was, if your partner went in for brain surgery and the surgeon killed your partner through their own negligence, and then the surgeon came to you and said, well, I tried my best, you wouldn't go, oh, that's okay then, mate. You tried your best in your brain surgery and you killed my partner, but that's fine. You tried your best. And it's essentially what he's doing, but on a mass scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know why people give him such a free ride in that regard.
No, I agree with you.
But these things are all kind of depressing, I guess. And it's a weekend, so why don't we leave it on like a bit of a happier note? What's happening at the Yard today?
Okay, so let's talk about what's happening at the Yard. At the moment, I've got Cody and Laurel and Sophia here. So we've already got people in here having a cup of tea, chilling. We are finishing off our lockdown banner. So I don't know whether you remember, but last year when we started the pandemic, you were actually in Spain at this point, Steve. we called on local people to sew a square about how they were feeling about lockdown.
Yeah.
Loads of you took part, and so now Sophia is just in the last part, so we can hang it on the wall here and be part of an exhibition to be really proud of. And we know that at some point it will go to the museum and it'll be part of a bigger piece of work celebrating the kind of a moment in history. We're going to be spending the morning playing board games. So if you're a Monopoly fan or you want to play a game of Cluedo to find out who murdered who in what room with what instrument, come down, come and get the board games out with us. But this afternoon, we're going to be doing what we're calling newsmakers. So it's where you can come and make your very own Zine, mini magazine. And of course, on a Friday, we've got our usual youth club stuff. So we've got the LGBTQ+I drop-in from 4 till 6. And then we've got Open Youth Club this evening, where we might even have a barbecue now that it's not so hot, but we won't feel like we're cooking ourselves outside. But,
excellent.
So, yeah, there's lots to do. And don't forget that Monday, we have got Make, Do, Amend, and it's our summer program. Yeah, so you don't have to be bored at home. Come along. And also don't forget that you can see Steve online gaming lunchtime-ish. Not necessarily every day, but he's often seen on our Twitch TV.
So thank you for joining me today, Bianca. Thank
You're
you
very
for watching,
welcome.
everyone. If there is a specific topic that you would like us to talk about, or if you would like to join us for Tea and Toast, then feel free to contact us via social media and we will arrange it.
One thing before you go, don't forget that if you're an organisation, you want to find out more about what we do, on Tuesday we've got Rewind to Unwind. And that's where we get together, we share a drink, and we kind of look at how we can be more collaborative, how we can kind of relax. If you've got a problem at work or your team's struggling or just anything, it's a space where we can share stories and kind of make Northampton better. So we've got some great speakers at this next one on Tuesday. The food has been ordered, the drink's on tap. So we're really looking forward to seeing as many of you here as possible.
So thank you again, and I hope you all have a good weekend. We'll see you in a bit because I'm going to be playing the Old Republic. Goodbye.
Excellent. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.